You're listening to the Virtue Podcast, brought to you by the Great Hearts Institute. Good conversations around the great conversation. Well, hello and welcome back to this special live edition, a webinar edition of the Virtue Podcast. I am Dr. Robert Jackson of the Great Hearts Institute, and I am joined today by Diana Schaub, Professor Diana Schaub of Loyola University in Maryland. Her area of expertise includes specialization on Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, African American thought, Montesquieu, a host of other scholars in the political science tradition, first and primary sources that we're delighted to explore. But today's focus in expectation of tomorrow's Constitution Day is a chance for us to look at a work that Diana was involved with more than 10 years ago. Diana, welcome to our show.
Thanks, I'm delighted to be here.
Your work on this project, the What So Proudly We Hail anthology, as I said, more than 10 years ago, was taken up with the cooperation of your co-authors, Amy and Leon Kass. And I'd just love to hear a little bit of the background story of what prompted you and the Kasses to undertake this project.
Yeah, I think credit really has to be given to Amy Kass. The idea emerged out of work that Amy had been doing for a long time. She was at Hudson Institute after many years of teaching at the University of Chicago. And in 2008, 2009, she ran a seminar series devoted to exploring the American character through literature. I actually went back and took a look at those reading packets for those seminars. And you can really see the basic shape of the project and the core set of readings that was already in place. Amy's seminar began by examining the significance of national identity with the discussion of the Edward Everett Hale story, The Man with the Country, and that is, the first selection in the final volume. Then it moved to readings centered on the American creed and those creedal ideas of liberty and equality. And then it turned to explorations of the American character through stories. Jack London, Willa Cather, Henry James, Mark Twain, they were all in that first iteration of the seminar. And then finally, the seminar looked more closely at the particular virtues that are needed for a healthy and robust civic life and at the substantive goals of our life in common. So as I say, if you look at the table of contents of the final volume, you can see those very same structural elements are there.
Well, we are so happy, right, at the Great Hearts Institute to be able to host the materials now, because in concert with the Kasses, certainly with Leon's support, with yours and the Hertog Foundation, we at the Great Hearts Institute are now hosting the materials associated with the curricular and lesson plans and other subject matter that came out of that text. I'm really interested in how you all went about editing and kind of building out, based on those courses that you just described of Amy's, how you went to build out and share the work of editing, because anthologies, that can be kind of a messy business, right?
Yeah, in this case, it was not. Amy had this core set of readings from the courses at Hudson. I took those courses with her. When those courses ended, I think Amy right then started to set about working on the anthology, and she asked me to join her to expand the selections, really. I had a pretty decent acquaintance with American literature as well as basic American political documents. So my task was to search out additional short stories from the American canon that would fit within the organizing categories that she already had. It was just great fun. When I found pieces that I thought would be suitable, I would pass them along to Amy for us to discuss and consider. Leon actually joined the project at a later date, when we were really ready to finalize the selections and whip the project, the volume into shape. And the hardest part, I think, was to make decisions about which pieces to cut. We really did have an abundance of material. We then divided up the writing of the introductions in the volume. Each selection has a brief introduction with some sort of framing questions, and then we shared those drafts and did edits back and forth. Leon was the one who actually wrote the draft for the overall introduction to the volume, and then we jointly edited it.
How long did that take all total, right? If you sort of begin with the course packet and then the final production.
Yeah, I mean, those two courses were 2008, 2009, and the volume came out in 2011. And of course, you know how long it takes to put out a book. So some substantial portion of that time was just, dealing with the press itself. So it was a pretty quick turnaround on our part, I think.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
And of course, we have seen others using the text and of course the resources within our network here at Great Hearts. And I've heard from other colleagues and those that I've been put in touch with that there really are some remarkable resources within the website. So we're going to, of course, direct folks there. Maybe you could just give us a quick tour of what to look for based on the resources that are added or the addendum to the text.
Yeah. So, the main thing is the volume itself, and there are framing questions there. But if you, sorry, I tipped my computer over there. If you go online to the website, there are all sorts of ancillary materials. So Amy and Leon, joined by other scholars and sometimes joined by me, put together a series of discussions, videos. And those are really terrific. There are not videos for each of the selections, but there are for, a fair number. And you can either watch those in full. They run about an hour each, sometimes a little bit more. But they've also, I believe, been broken up into smaller segments on particular topics. So those are great. There's also the study packets, and I really want to highlight those. I think these are really unique. Usually, when you get some kind of a study aid, it'll just be a list of questions, and some of those questions might be very good. But Amy and Leon, they're framed with two sets of questions. The first set of questions is called thinking about the text. So this means asking those basic questions, who are the characters here? What's the plot? What's going on? And sort of taking you through the story. Really a way to help students learn to engage in that sort of the development of their moral imagination as they enter into a story and the characters of the story.
Right.
And then there's a second set of questions called thinking with the text. And here you take your lead. What are the major issues that this story has brought to the surface? We have a Hawthorne story about it's called The Artist of the Beautiful. It's about the relationship between American artists and their audience. So you then can, ask some larger questions and introduce students to those larger questions. So I think that that resource is terrific. And then there are these, other features, the American Calendar series that was added. This is not really so much a part of the original anthology, but here I was not working together with the Kasses to do this, but they put together these just wonderful collections for each of the major American holidays, poems, stories, literature to accompany those holidays.
That's right. It is helpful because in our schools and certainly in our homes, as we seek to promote civic virtue, there's something very rich about being able to integrate within a calendar, within a cyclical pattern year over year, as our children develop, something of the literature, again, of the poetry, of the song even, that gives spirit, right, to the American experience. I wonder if, as you've talked to teachers and those who have read the text and perhaps used it in a classroom, if you've picked up on any themes, that is to say, anything that seems to reoccur in terms of their usage of this anthology and the resources attended.
Yeah, I think people use it in different ways. But you were right to mention the songs there. Again, this is a very unique feature of this anthology. At the end of the anthology, there is a collection of American songs where we give the lyrics to those songs and pose some questions to be raised about that. I was sort of reminded of this passage from Winston Churchill's early autobiography. It's called My Early Life. He talks about his schooling at Harrow. He pretty much didn't like his schooling. He did not want to study the classical languages. He resisted learning Latin. But he said what he really loved about Harrow, what really stayed with him, what formed him, he said with the poetry and the songs. So I think part of the premise of this anthology is that, yes, we are a creedal people. It's important to understand those ideas, to understand the self-evident truths of the Declaration of Independence, but that there is also always an affectional element to patriotism. And I think through the stories, the way the stories develop the moral imagination, through the songs, and then, maybe thinking more reflectively about those songs. I do think now, I grew up with all of those patriotic songs, but I'm not sure that happens in early education anymore, at least, not in the public schools as much as it used to. So it's probably necessary to become a little more self-conscious about those, the building of those affectional elements.
I appreciate those remarks because within the classical orbit, you will hear schools very much openly speak of our pursuit of truth, of goodness, and of beauty. And my sense is, as I look at these schools, observing them and contributing to them, that the affectional element, the sort of development of an affection for the good, to love what is good, to be drawn to that which is noble, is really at the heart of our work. And I'm wondering if, from your own personal experience, you were given a certain selection of the anthology to complete or to flesh out, if you had a particular favorite that captured your own heart.
I do have certain favorites. I think the two that I would mention, one that occurs in the very first section, right after the Hale story. And maybe I'm especially attached to this one because it was one of my contributions to the volume. It's a short story, a very short story by Ralph Ellison called In a Strange Country. And it involves an African-American serviceman who finds himself in Wales during World War II. And he is struggling with the notion of whether he can feel patriotism. Partly he experiences the desire to feel patriotism, but he also feels ashamed of his own patriotism. He suppresses it because of the treatment that people of his complexion are what is meted out to them in the United States. So it's just a wonderful, wonderful story showing his struggle with that. Another really terrific story is one that comes at the very end by Willa Cather. We had so many choices from Cather. I think she ends up with 2, maybe 3 stories in the volume, but we had at least 5 that were under consideration from her. And this one is called The Namesake, and it is about an expatriate American sculptor abroad. So interestingly, my 2 favorites both involve people who are sort of out of the country, and that leads them to deeper reflections on the nature of their connection to their native land. And this, sculptor is in the company of many, many young American expatriates. And he tells a story that is really designed to get them to think more seriously about their connection to their homeland, and that connection as really a source of their artistic imagination. So that's another really terrific one.
I will look out for those too as I go back to the volume, because I've enjoyed reading it to my own children, and I know that others are doing the same. And our classroom teachers are finding this resource so very, very helpful. As we round out this conversation, may I just ask if you were to hope for or otherwise anticipate a continued legacy for What So Proudly We Hail, How would you like to see it received in the future?
Well, I would like it just to continue to be read. I mean, it makes a great gift. It's a very good volume for reading groups to consider, and you can just kind of pick and choose. Either go with authors that you know well and would like to read again, or pick an author you've never heard of that appears in the volume and give that a try. I also think it's possible actually to structure entire courses just around the volume. I've really thought about teaching my intro politics course just by using What So Proudly We Hail, because remember, it includes not only these short stories, but also some of the key selections of American political document speeches.
Mm-hmm.
So, a couple of speeches from Abraham Lincoln, his Lyceum address, his second inaugural, Birmingham jail address from Martin Luther King, selections, from Jefferson, from W.E.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, Frederick Douglass. So it really does have some of these, key American documents. So I think it is a pretty comprehensive education.
And something that, as you're pointing out, can be used by young and old alike. It's not limited merely to the grammar school, which is where I've seen it used very effectively with the poetry and the song. But this is something that any American could have and could take advantage of regardless.
Yeah, if we have time, can I tell you about one selection that was left out that really broke my heart?
Please. Please do.
We had a story by Albert Payson Terhune. He was a great writer about animal stories. And this terrific story about a dog who overcomes his fear of birds of prey in order to rescue his handicapped child owner from an attack by a hawk or something. So it's I thought it would have made a great addition to that section that develops the virtues. There is a section devoted really just to courage. Leon disagreed with me. He thought that we should preserve the distinction between animal courage and human courage. So I lost that debate, but it's still a terrific story. So I would, and that's one that's maybe I think especially suitable for young people. Courage is in a way the foundational virtue for all of the higher level virtues.
We'll take a look and see if we can find that. We could even include that in the show notes if that's still available. I assume, given its date, that it's probably beyond copyright and should be available in the public domain.
Beyond.
So we'll look for it. I do have a note here that came across in our texts that Tom Cleveland from the Jack Miller Center wanted to give you a bit of a shout out and suggest that he's delighted to see the website up and running. Uses this material all the time in their work. And of course, they're advancing history and civic education across this country and the training of teachers and promoting good, sound civic instruction. So it's a resource that What So Proudly We Hail is a resource that others are using to help and to train the next generation of teachers. So that's a wonderful word. Diana Schaub is the Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. And of course, as I mentioned, Professor of Political Science at Loyola University Maryland. You can find her publications across the web in a variety of contexts, but we're just glad that she joined us here today for this webinar. And of course, that What So Proudly We Hail and your good work is coming back around, and we hope to see it have much of a life in advancing the American experience, as you said earlier, and improving and encouraging the affections of Americans from coast to coast. Thank you so much for your time, Diana.
Thank you.
Registration for the 2023 National Symposium for Classical Education is now open. Join us February 22nd through the 24th in Phoenix, Arizona for 3 days of unsurpassed scholarship, professional workshops, and networking opportunities. For more information, visit www.greathearts.institute. Working together to renew the tradition.